She heard his laughter over the phone, the same laughter from 6 years ago, when he left her alone, pregnant, without looking back. He mocked her, ridiculed the fact that she now delivers food to survive, but what he didn't know is that she was on the other side of that very door, with the 2 daughters he never met. What does it cost to laugh at the one you destroyed, when she brings back everything you lost without knowing? The phone rang at 11:47 p.m. Min-jae didn't look up from the contracts spread across his desk. His penthouse office overlooked the Seoul skyline, floor-to-ceiling windows reflecting the cold glow of the city below. He answered without checking the caller ID. "Delivery confirmed for Hanam-dong, Building 7. Is this correct?" The voice was soft, professional, tired. Min-jae's pen stopped mid-signature. He knew that voice. "Ji-woo?" There was a pause on the other end. A breath held too long. "Yes. Your order will arrive in 15 minutes. Min-jae leaned back in his chair, a slow smile spreading across his face. "Ji-woo? The Ji-woo?" He let out a low laugh. "I didn't realize you'd fallen this far. Delivering food now?" Silence. "What happened to that big dream of yours? Law school, wasn't it?" His tone was light, mocking. "Or did reality catch up with you?" "Your order will arrive in 15 minutes, she repeated, voice flat. "Please have payment ready." "Still proud, I see." Min-jae's smile faded. "You know, I always wondered what happened to you. 6 years is a long time, but I guess some people are built to survive, and some people are built to serve." The line went dead. Min-jae stared at the phone for a moment, then tossed it onto the desk. He'd forgotten about Ji-woo years ago, or at least he told himself he had. The night she told him she was pregnant, he'd walked out of her apartment and never looked back. He had an empire to build, a reputation to forge. There was no room for weakness. And a child? That was the ultimate weakness. 15 minutes later, the intercom buzzed. "Sir, there's a delivery at the front gate." Min-jae stood, straightening his shirt. He walked to the window, looking down at the entrance below. A small figure stood beneath the security lights, a delivery bag slung over one shoulder. And behind her, Min-jae's breath caught. 2 small girls, identical, dark hair pulled into ponytails. They stood close to the woman, hands clasped together. He pressed the intercom. "Let her in." The gate opened. Min-jae watched as Ji-woo walked up the long driveway, the children following her like shadows. She moved with the same quiet determination he remembered, but there was something different now, something harder. When she reached the door, Min-jae opened it before she could knock. For a moment, they just stared at each other. Ji-woo looked older, thinner. Her face was bare of makeup, exhaustion written in the dark circles beneath her eyes. But her gaze was steady, unflinching. "Your food," she said, holding out the bag. Min-jae didn't take it. His eyes dropped to the 2 girls standing behind her. They were small, maybe 5 years old. They had Ji-woo's eyes, his jawline. "Who?" His voice came out rougher than he intended. "Who are they?" Ji-woo didn't answer immediately. She set the delivery bag on the ground, then crouched down, whispering something to the girls. They nodded, stepping back toward the gate. When she stood, her expression was unreadable. "Their names are Hana and Yuna," she said quietly. "They're 5 years old, and they're yours." Min-jae felt the ground shift beneath him. "That's impossible." "Is it?" Ji-woo's voice was calm, too calm. "You left the night I told you I was pregnant. You didn't stay long enough to hear that I was carrying twins." Min-jae's mind raced. 6 years ago. The argument, her tears, his cold dismissal. "I'm not ready for this. I never will be." He'd walked out, blocked her number, erased her from his life. "You're lying." Ji-woo reached into her jacket and pulled out a folded envelope. She held it out to him. "They're birth certificates, DNA test results, medical records. Take them. Or don't. It doesn't change the truth." Min-jae stared at the envelope but didn't move. "Why now?" His voice was low, dangerous. "Why show up after all this time?" "I didn't plan this." Ji-woo's jaw tightened. "Your address came up on my app. I didn't know it was you until I heard your voice on the phone. And when you laughed at me..." She stopped, her composure cracking for just a second. "I realized I was tired of hiding, tired of pretending you don't exist. You should have stayed hidden." Ji-woo's eyes flashed. "You don't get to decide that anymore." For a long moment, neither of them spoke. Finally, Ji-woo picked up the delivery bag and held it out again. "Your food, 32,001. Min-jae took the bag, his fingers brushing hers. The touch was brief, electric. He pulled out his wallet and handed her a 100,001 bill. "Keep the change." Ji-woo looked at the money, then back at him. Slowly, Deliberately, she tore the bill in half and let the pieces fall to the ground. I don't need your charity, Min-jae. I never did. She turned and walked back toward the gate, where the two girls were waiting. Min-jae watched them go, his heart pounding in his chest. Just before they disappeared into the night, one of the girls, Hana maybe, or Yuna, looked back at him. Her eyes were dark, curious, and then they were gone. Min-jae stood in the doorway for a long time, staring at the torn bill on the ground. He didn't move until the security lights went dark. Min-jae didn't sleep that night. He sat in his office, the envelope Ji-woo had left behind spread open on his desk. Birth certificates, DNA results, medical records. Everything was there, neatly organized, as if she'd been preparing for this moment for years. Hana and Yuna, his daughters. The DNA test was recent, dated 3 weeks ago. Ji-woo must have known this confrontation was coming. She'd prepared for it. Min-jae's hands shook as he read the results. 99. 7% probability of paternity. He'd spent 6 years building an empire. 6 years erasing weakness. 6 years convincing himself that walking away from Ji-woo was the right choice. And now, with 2 pieces of paper, that entire foundation was crumbling. His phone buzzed. It was Kang Dae, his second in command. "Boss, we have a problem. The Busan crew is making moves. They're questioning your leadership." Min-jae closed his eyes. "Handle it. They're saying you're distracted, that you've lost focus." "I said handle it." He hung up, distracted. They had no idea. Min-jae stood and walked to the window. The city stretched out before him, endless and cold. He'd clawed his way to the top of this world. He'd made enemies. He'd destroyed anyone who stood in his way. But he'd never faced anything like this. The next morning, Min-jae did something he hadn't done in years. He went looking for Ji-woo. It wasn't hard to find her. A few calls to his contacts, a search through delivery service records, and he had her address. She lived in Gurodong, in a cramped apartment complex on the outskirts of the city. The kind of place Min-jae would never step foot in under normal circumstances. He parked his car on the street and looked up at the building. Laundry hung from balconies. The paint was peeling. It was a world away from his penthouse. He climbed the stairs to the 3rd floor and knocked on apartment 302. The door opened a crack. Ji-woo's face appeared, eyes narrowing when she saw him. "What are you doing here? We need to talk." "There's nothing to talk about. I read the documents." Ji-woo's expression didn't change. And I want to see them. The girls." "No." Min-jae's jaw tightened. "They're my daughters. Biologically, yes, but you're not their father." Ji-woo started to close the door, but Min-jae put his hand against it. "Ji-woo, you don't get to do this." Her voice was quiet, but there was steel beneath it. "You don't get to walk back into our lives because you suddenly feel guilty. They don't know you. They don't need you. Maybe I need them." Ji-woo laughed, but there was no humor in it. "You needed them 6 years ago, Min-jae, when I was pregnant and terrified and alone. You needed them when I was working 3 jobs to keep us fed. You needed them when Hana had pneumonia and I didn't have money for the hospital." Her eyes glistened, but she didn't let the tears fall. "You don't get to need them now. I didn't know. You didn't want to know." Ji-woo's voice cracked. "I called you. I messaged you. I showed up at your office, and you had security throw me out." Min-jae felt something twist in his chest. He remembered that day. He'd told his men to make her leave, to make sure she never came back. "I was different then. Were you?" Ji-woo's gaze was piercing. "Or are you just afraid of what people will say when they find out the great Min-jae has children he abandoned?" "That's not—" "Go home, Min-jae." Ji-woo stepped back, her hand on the door. "You made your choice 6 years ago. Live with it." The door closed. Min-jae stood in the hallway, staring at the peeling paint on the door. For the first time in years, he felt powerless. Min-jae didn't leave. He returned to Ji-woo's apartment the next day, and the day after that. Each time she refused to let him in. Each time he stood outside her door like a stranger. On the 4th day, the door opened before he could knock. Ji-woo stood there, arms crossed, exhaustion written across her face. "You're not going to stop, are you?" "No," she sighed. "Fine. You want to see them?" "You can see them, but on my terms." Min-jae nodded. Ji-woo led him inside. The apartment was small, but clean. Toys were scattered across the floor. Drawings covered the walls. It was warm, lived in. Everything Min-jae's penthouse wasn't. "Hana, Yuna, come here." 2 small figures appeared from the bedroom. They looked at Min-jae with wide, curious eyes. "This is—" Ji-woo hesitated. This is Minjae. He's someone I used to know. The girls didn't say anything. They just stared. Minjae crouched down, trying to make himself less intimidating. Hi, one of them said softly. Hana, maybe. You're tall, the other one said. Yuna. Minjae smiled, though it felt awkward. Yeah, I guess I am. They stared at each other for a moment longer, and then the girls lost interest and went back to their toys. Jiwoo watched from the doorway, arms still crossed. They're beautiful, Minjae said quietly. I know. How do you manage? Alone? Jiwoo's expression hardened. I do what I have to. I work. I survive. I don't have the luxury of asking how. Minjae stood. Let me help. I don't want your money. It's not about money. It's about what? Guilt? Jiwoo stepped closer, her voice low so the girls wouldn't hear. You think you can fix 6 years of absence with a check? With apologies? I don't know what I can fix, Minjae admitted. But I want to try. Jiwoo studied him for a long moment. Then she shook her head. You're not doing this for them. You're doing this for yourself, to feel like you're not the monster you know you are. The words hit harder than any physical blow. Maybe, Minjae said quietly. But does it matter? If I can give them a better life, they already have a life. Jiwoo's voice was firm. And it doesn't include you. Before Minjae could respond, his phone buzzed. He glanced at the screen. Kangdae. Boss, we have a situation. The Busan crew knows about the woman and the kids. They're planning to use it against you. Minjae's blood went cold. He looked up at Jiwoo, then at the girls playing on the floor. I have to go. Jiwoo frowned. What's wrong? Nothing, He stopped. Lock your doors tonight. Don't go out. Minjae, just do it. He left before she could ask more questions. As he drove back to his penthouse, Minjae made a call. Kangdae, I want security on Jiwoo's apartment. 24-hour surveillance. If anyone gets within a block of her, I want to know. Boss, are you sure that's... Do it. He hung up. For years, Minjae had controlled everything in his world. He'd built walls to keep emotions out. He'd severed ties to avoid weakness. But now, those walls were crumbling. And the cost of control was becoming unbearable. Jiwoo noticed the men 2 days later. They were subtle. Too subtle for ordinary surveillance. A black sedan parked across the street, engine always running. A man in a baseball cap who pretended to read the same newspaper for 3 hours straight. Another one standing near the convenience store, smoking cigarette after cigarette, but never actually buying anything. She wasn't stupid. She'd lived in Seoul long enough to recognize when someone was being watched, and she knew exactly who was responsible. It was Tuesday morning when she finally called him. Hana and Yuna were at daycare, and Jiwoo was between delivery shifts, sitting in her tiny kitchen with a cup of instant coffee going cold in her hands. Minjae answered on the second ring. Jiwoo, what did you do? Her voice was tight, controlled. There was a pause. I'm keeping you safe. I didn't ask for this. Jiwoo stood and walked to the window, looking down at the black car idling below. The driver was visible through the windshield, his eyes scanning the street with practiced efficiency. I don't want your men watching me, watching my daughters. Jiwoo, there are people who want to hurt me. And now that they know about you, then this is your problem, not mine. Her voice sharpened. You don't get to drag us into your world because you suddenly developed a conscience. I'm not dragging you into anything. I'm protecting you. Minjae's tone was calm, reasonable, the same tone he probably used when negotiating with rivals. It made her want to throw the phone across the room. I've been protecting myself for 6 years, Minjae. I've been protecting them for 6 years. I don't need you now. You might not think you do, but... She hung up. For a long moment, Jiwoo stood at the window, her hand pressed against the glass. The cold seeped through, making her fingers ache. She wanted to hate him. God, she wanted to hate him with every fiber of her being. But the truth was more complicated than that. Seeing him again had cracked something open inside her, something she'd sealed away years ago when she realized he wasn't coming back, when she realized she was truly alone. And now that crack was widening, letting in light and pain in equal measure. That night, Jiwoo sat at the small kitchen table after putting the girls to bed. The apartment was quiet, except for the soft hum of the refrigerator and the distant sound of traffic outside. She pulled out her phone and scrolled through old photos, pictures of Hana and Yuna at various ages, their first steps, their first day of daycare, birthday parties celebrated in this very apartment with secondhand decorations and homemade cake. In none of these photos was there a father. Just her. Always just her. Jiwoo set the phone down and buried her face in her hands. She'd thought she was strong. She'd thought she'd moved past this. But the truth was, part of her had never stopped hoping that Min-jae would come back, that he would realize what he'd lost, that he would choose them. And now he had. 6 years too late. The next morning, Min-jae showed up at her door again. This time, he wasn't alone. A woman stood beside him, tall, elegant, probably in her mid-40s. She wore a tailored suit and carried a leather briefcase. Her hair was pulled back in a neat bun, and her eyes held the sharp intelligence of someone who'd spent years navigating complex legal battles. "This is Attorney Seo," Min-jae said without preamble. "She's here to help." Jiwoo frowned, her hand still on the doorknob. "Help with what?" Attorney Seo stepped forward, offering a polite smile that didn't quite reach her eyes. "Ms. Park, I'm Ji-hai Seo. Mr. Min has retained my services to set up a comprehensive trust fund for your daughters. It will cover their education expenses, medical costs, extracurricular activities, and general living expenses. You won't have to work multiple jobs anymore." The words hung in the air like a grenade with the pin pulled. Jiwoo stared at the woman, then at Min-jae. "No." Min-jae's jaw tightened. "Jiwoo, I said no." She looked back at Attorney Seo, her voice firm.
If you're listening to this right now, it's because this story has already pulled you in a little. But what you're hearing here is just a part of it. The full version includes 30 complete stories, no cuts. No ads, just the audio flowing while you listen. The QR code is on your screen now, or the link is pinned in the queue.
"I appreciate the offer, but I don't want his money." Attorney Seo exchanged a glance with Min-jae before continuing, her tone professional but gentle. "Miss Park, I understand this is complicated, but this isn't about pride. It's about giving your daughters the opportunities they deserve. Quality education, proper health care, stability." "They already have stability," Jiwoo interrupted. "They have a home. They have food. They have a mother who loves them and who's there for them every single day, who doesn't abandon them when things get hard." The last words were aimed directly at Min-jae, and they hit their mark. Attorney Seo cleared her throat delicately. "Perhaps I should give you two a moment to discuss this privately. I'll wait downstairs." She left, her heels clicking softly against the hallway floor. The door closed, leaving Jiwoo and Min-jae alone in the narrow entryway. For a long moment, neither of them spoke. "Why are you doing this?" Jiwoo finally asked, her voice barely above a whisper. "Why now?" Min-jae took a breath. "Because I was wrong. 6 years ago, I was a coward. I chose power over you, over them, and I've regretted it every day since." "You don't get to regret it." Jiwoo's eyes glistened, but she refused to let the tears fall. "You don't get to feel sorry for yourself and expect forgiveness. Do you have any idea what it was like, Min-jae? Do you know what it was like to be 19 years old, pregnant with twins, and completely alone?" He opened his mouth, but she kept going. "Do you know what it's like to stand in a clinic, holding a form that could end everything, because you're so terrified you can't see a way forward? To hear your baby's heartbeats for the first time and know that the person you loved, the person you thought loved you, didn't want them?" Min-jae's chest constricted. "Jiwoo, I stood outside that clinic 3 times, she continued, her voice breaking. 3 times I almost walked in, because I was 19 and broke and scared out of my mind. But I couldn't do it. Even though you didn't want them, I did. Even though I had no idea how I was going to survive, I wanted them. I'm sorry." The words felt pathetically inadequate. "Sorry doesn't change anything." Jiwoo wiped her eyes roughly. "Sorry doesn't undo 6 years. It doesn't undo the nights I cried myself to sleep. It doesn't undo the fear I felt every time one of them got sick, and I didn't know if I could afford treatment. It doesn't undo the meals I skipped so they could eat." Each word was a knife, and Min-jae felt every single one. "Then let me try to make it right," he said quietly. "Let me give them the life I should have given them from the start." "They don't need your life, Min-jae." Jiwoo's voice was thick with emotion. "They don't need money or a trust fund or surveillance teams. They need a father." The word hung between them, heavy and undeniable. Min-jae swallowed hard. "I don't know how to be that." "Then learn." Before he could respond, the bedroom door creaked open. Hana peeked out, her small face scrunched with sleepiness. She was clutching her favorite stuffed rabbit. "Mommy?" Her voice was soft. "Who's that man?" Jiwoo quickly wiped her eyes and forced a smile. "No one, sweetie. Go back to bed." But Hana didn't move. She looked at Min-jae with those dark, intelligent eyes, his eyes, and tilted her head. "Are you my dad?" The question was so simple, So innocent. So devastating. Jiwoo's breath caught. She looked at Min-jae, and for the first time since he'd come back into her life, he saw something other than anger in her eyes. He saw fear and hope, and a terrible, fragile vulnerability. Min-jae crouched down slowly, bringing himself to Hana's eye level. His hands were shaking. "Yeah," he said, his voice rough. "I am." Hana studied him for a long moment, her expression serious. "Where were you?" The question was so direct, so piercing, that Min-jae felt his throat close. I was lost." "Are you found now?" Min-jae's vision blurred. "I'm trying to be." Hana nodded, as if that made perfect sense. Then she yawned and shuffled back into the bedroom, closing the door behind her. The apartment fell silent again. Min-jae stood slowly, his hands still trembling. He couldn't look at Jiwoo. "Don't hurt them," she said finally, her voice barely audible. "If you're going to be in their lives, if you're really going to do this, don't hurt them. They've been through enough." "I won't." "Swear it." Jiwoo's eyes were fierce. "Swear on something that actually matters to you." Min-jae met her gaze. "I swear on their lives. On yours. I won't hurt them." Jiwoo searched his face for a long moment, looking for any trace of deception. Finally, she nodded and opened the door. "You can come back tomorrow. For 1 hour. That's all you get." "Okay." "And Min-jae?" She waited until he met her eyes. "Get rid of the surveillance team. If I see them again, you're done. I mean it." He nodded. "I'll call them off." As Min-jae walked down the hallway toward the stairs, he pulled out his phone and dialed Kangdae. "Pull the surveillance on Jiwoo's apartment." "Boss, are you sure that's—" "Pull them. Now." He hung up. As he stepped out into the cold morning air, Min-jae realized something fundamental had shifted inside him. For the first time in 6 years, he wasn't running away from something. He was walking toward it. And it terrified him more than any rival gang ever had. The Busan crew made their move exactly 2 weeks later, on a Wednesday afternoon when the autumn rain was turning Seoul's streets into rivers of gray. Min-jae was in the middle of a tense negotiation meeting with his distributors when Kangdae burst through the conference room doors, his normally composed face pale with panic. "Boss." Kangdae's voice was tight. "We have a situation." Min-jae looked up from the contracts spread across the table, irritation flashing in his eyes. This better be important. They took her. The room seemed to tilt sideways. Min-jae stood slowly, his chair scraping against the floor. "What? Jiwoo?" "The Busan crew grabbed her outside the girls' daycare about 20 minutes ago. We got the call from your surveillance team. I pulled that team 2 weeks ago." Kangdae hesitated. "I put them back. As a precaution." "Boss, the girls are safe. They were already inside the building with their teacher. But Jiwoo is gone." The words didn't make sense. Min-jae's brain refused to process them. "Gone," he repeated flatly. "They grabbed her right off the street. White van, professional operation. And they sent this." Kangdae held out his phone. Min-jae took it with numb fingers. The screen showed a photo of Jiwoo bound to a chair in what looked like an empty warehouse. Her lip was split, blood trailing down her chin. Her left eye was swelling shut, but her expression was defiant, furious. Beneath the image, a text message. "Step down, or she dies. You have 12 hours. The phone cracked in Min-jae's grip. "How long ago?" His voice was dangerously quiet. 20 minutes. "Boss, we're already mobilizing." "Where are my daughters?" "Still at the daycare. I have 4 men stationed outside. Get them to my penthouse, now. Full security detail." Min-jae was already moving toward the door. "And I want every available man on this. Call in favors. Wake up our contacts. I don't care what it costs." "Boss." Kangdae caught his arm. "If we go after her, this becomes a full-scale war. The Busan crew has been looking for an excuse to move against us for months. This is exactly what they want." Min-jae pulled his arm free, his eyes black with rage. "Then we give them a war. Is she worth it?" The question stopped Min-jae cold. He turned, and Kangdae actually took a step back at the look on his face. "She's worth everything," Min-jae said quietly. "And if you ever question that again, you're done. Understood?" Kangdae nodded quickly. "Understood. Good. Now find her." The next 6 hours were the longest of Min-jae's life. He paced his office like a caged animal while his men scoured the city. Reports came in every few minutes. Possible sightings, dead ends, false leads. The Busan crew was being careful, hiding their tracks. But they'd made one mistake. They'd underestimated how far Min-jae was willing to go. At 8:47 p.m., one of his informants called with a location, an abandoned textile factory in Bucheon, on the outskirts of Seoul. It had been out of operation for 3 years, left to rot. The perfect place for a kidnapping. Min-jae was in his car before the call ended. "Boss, wait for backup," Kang-dae urged through the phone. "We can have a full team there in 30 minutes. "I'm not waiting." Min-jae's hands gripped the steering wheel so tightly his knuckles went white. "Tell them to follow. You're walking into a trap." "I know." He hung up. The drive to Bushin took 40 minutes through rain-slicked streets. Min-jae barely registered the other cars, the traffic lights, the city passing by in a blur. His mind was entirely focused on the image of Ji-woo's bruised face. The rage was a living thing inside him, burning hotter with every breath. When he finally pulled up to the factory, the building loomed like a corpse in the darkness. Broken windows stared down at him like empty eye sockets. Graffiti covered the walls. Min-jae got out of the car. He was unarmed. He'd left his gun in the glove compartment deliberately. This wasn't about firepower. This was about sending a message. The factory's main entrance hung open on broken hinges. Min-jae stepped inside. The interior was a cavern of rusted machinery and collapsed scaffolding. Water dripped from holes in the ceiling, creating pools on the concrete floor. And in the center of it all, lit by a single hanging work light, was Ji-woo. She was tied to a chair, her head hanging forward. Blood had dried on her face, but she was breathing. Around her stood 7 men. Min-jae recognized the one in the center immediately. Choi Sung-min, the Busan crew's second-in-command, a man who'd been trying to move against Min-jae's organization for the better part of a year. "Min-jae." Choi's smile was ugly. "I was wondering how long it would take you to show up. 30 minutes? I'm impressed. You must really care about this one." Min-jae's eyes never left Ji-woo. "Let her go. Straight to business. I like that." Choi walked in a slow circle around Ji-woo's chair. "But see, we have a problem. You've been untouchable for too long. The great Min-jae, the ghost king of Seoul. Nobody can hurt you because you have no weaknesses." He grabbed Ji-woo's hair and yanked her head back. Her eyes opened, unfocused and pained. When she saw Min-jae, something flickered across her face. Fear, relief, anger. "But now we know the truth," Choi continued. "You have a weakness after all. A woman. And 2 little girls." Min-jae took a step forward. 3 of Choi's men immediately raised their guns. "Let her go," Min-jae repeated, his voice deadly calm. "This is between us. She has nothing to do with it. She has everything to do with it." Choi released Ji-woo's hair, letting her head drop forward again. "You want to keep her? Fine. Here's the deal. You step down. Hand over your territory, your contacts, your distribution networks, everything. And maybe, we'll let her walk out of here." Min-jae had spent 6 years building his empire. 6 years clawing his way to the top, through blood and ruthlessness. 6 years convincing himself that power was the only thing that mattered. His organization controlled half of Seoul's underground economy. Stepping down meant losing everything he'd fought for. "Fine," Min-jae said quietly. The words seemed to echo in the vast space. Choi blinked. "What? I'll step down. I'll give you everything. Just let her go." One of the other men laughed. "He's bluffing." But Choi was staring at Min-jae, studying his face. "You're serious. Let her go, and it's yours. All of it." For a moment, Choi seemed genuinely shocked. Then his expression hardened into something cruel. "You'd really give up your entire empire for one woman?" "Yes." "Why?" Min-jae's eyes finally met Choi's. "Because she's worth more than any empire." The words hung in the air. Then Choi laughed, a harsh, bitter sound. He pulled a gun from his waistband and pressed it against Ji-woo's temple. "Or," he said slowly, "I could just kill you both. Eliminate the competition and send a message to anyone else who thinks about crossing us." "That would be a mistake," Min-jae said calmly. "Would it?" Choi's finger moved to the trigger. "Seems pretty smart to me. Because the 20 men surrounding this building will level it the second they hear gunfire." Choi's smile faltered. As if on cue, red laser sights appeared on every man in the room. They came from the broken windows, from the doorways, from the scaffolding above. Kang-dae stepped out of the shadows, a rifle in his hands. "Drop the gun, Choi." For a long moment, nobody moved. Then Choi's grip tightened on the weapon. "You think this changes anything?" "You think—" Min-jae moved. He was across the space in 3 strides, faster than anyone expected. He grabbed Choi's wrist and twisted, the gun clattering to the floor. Then he drove his fist into Choi's face with enough force to send the man sprawling backward. Chaos erupted. Choi's men reached for their weapons, but they never got the chance to use them. Min-jae's crew poured into the factory from every entrance, weapons drawn. It was over in seconds. Choi was on the ground, disarmed and bleeding. His men were restrained, zip-tied and lined up against the wall. Min-jae didn't spare them a second glance. He ran to Ji-woo, pulling a knife from his pocket and cutting through the ropes binding her wrists and ankles. "Ji-woo, look at me." Her eyes opened, focusing on his face. "You came," she whispered. "Of course I came." His hands were shaking as he checked her injuries. The cut on her lip, the bruising around her eye, rope burns on her wrists. "Can you stand?" "I think so." He helped her to her feet, keeping one arm around her waist to support her weight. She swayed, leaning heavily against him. "The girls," she murmured. They're safe. They're at my penthouse with security. They're fine." Ji-woo's legs gave out, and Min-jae caught her, lowering them both to the ground. She buried her face against his chest, her whole body shaking. "You were going to give it all up," she said, her voice muffled. "For me." Min-jae held her tighter. "I would have." "Why?" "Because I love you." The words came out rough, unpolished. "Because I should have loved you 6 years ago. Because I was a coward and an idiot, and I lost 6 years with you and with our daughters, and I'm not losing another second." Ji-woo pulled back, looking up at him with tear-stained eyes. "Min-jae, I know I don't deserve forgiveness. I know I can't undo the past, but I'm asking for a chance. A real chance. Not just to be their father, but to be yours." For a long moment, Ji-woo just stared at him. Then she grabbed his collar and pulled him down into a kiss. It was desperate and messy and tasted like blood and tears. But it was real. When they finally broke apart, Ji-woo was crying openly. "If you ever leave again," she whispered, "I will hunt you down and kill you myself." Min-jae let out a shaky laugh. "I'm not going anywhere." Kang-dae cleared his throat from nearby. "Boss, we should go. Police will be here soon." Min-jae nodded and helped Ji-woo to her feet again. This time she was steadier. As they walked out of the factory, Choi's voice called out from behind them. "This isn't over, Min-jae. You think you can just walk away from this life? They'll come for you. They'll come for all of you." Min-jae stopped at the doorway. Without turning around, he spoke loud enough for everyone to hear. "Let them come. I'll be ready." Then he walked out into the rain with Ji-woo in his arms. 3 months later, Min-jae stood outside Ji-woo's apartment building, the same building where he'd first confronted his past, holding 2 small birthday cakes shaped like unicorns. Hana and Yuna were turning 6 today. It was a Saturday morning in early December. The first snow of the season was falling in soft flakes, dusting the streets white. Min-jae watched his breath mist in the cold air as he climbed the stairs to the 3rd floor. He'd made this trip dozens of times now, but it still felt surreal. Ji-woo opened the door before he could knock, as if she'd been waiting. She was wearing jeans and an oversized sweater, her hair pulled back in a messy ponytail. She looked beautiful. "You're early," she said, but she was smiling. "I didn't want to miss it." Min-jae held up the cakes. "I got both flavors." Couldn't remember which one they liked more. "They like both." Ji-woo stepped aside to let him in. "But that's twice as much sugar, so you're handling the sugar rush later." "Deal." The apartment was warm and filled with the smell of cooking food. Balloons covered the ceiling, silver and pink and white. Streamers hung from the walls. A small pile of wrapped presents sat in the corner. It looked nothing like Min-jae's penthouse with its minimalist design and expensive furniture. It looked like a home. Hana and Yuna were in the living room, both wearing matching princess dresses that Min-jae had bought them last week. They were arguing over which movie to watch, a familiar routine. "We already watched Frozen yesterday," Hana insisted, her hands on her hips. "But it's my birthday too," Yuna shot back. "We can watch it again." "Girls," Ji-woo called from the kitchen. "Your dad is here." Both girls' heads whipped around. Their faces lit up simultaneously. "Dad!" They ran over, and Min-jae crouched down just in time to catch them both in a hug. They smelled like strawberry shampoo, and the chocolate they'd definitely been sneaking from the kitchen. "Happy birthday," he said, his voice thick. "Did you bring presents?" Yuna asked immediately. "Yuna!" Ji-woo scolded from the doorway. "What did we say about asking for presents?" "That it's rude," Yuna recited dutifully. Then she looked back at Min-jae with wide, hopeful eyes. "But did you?" Min-jae laughed. "Maybe. We'll see after cake." "Cake!" Hana grabbed his hand. "Come on, we have to sing first." For the next hour, Min-jae let himself be swept up in the chaos of a 6-year-old's birthday party. They sang off-key. They ate too much cake. Hana accidentally smashed frosting in Yuna's hair. which led to a minor frosting war that Jiwoo had to break up. It was loud and messy and perfect. At one point, while the girls were opening presents in the living room, Jiwoo joined Minjae in the kitchen. They stood side by side at the sink, washing dishes. "Thank you," she said quietly. Minjae looked at her. "For what? For being here? She trailed off, searching for the right words. "For choosing us. I should have chosen you 6 years ago," Minjae said, setting down a plate. "I should have been here for all of this. First steps, first words, first birthdays. You can't change the past." "I know." He turned to face her fully. "But I can make sure I'm here for everything moving forward. Every birthday, every school play, every scraped knee and bad dream and argument over movies." Jiwoo's eyes glistened. "You really mean that? I've never meant anything more in my life." She reached up and cupped his face, her thumb brushing over his cheekbone. "I love you," she whispered. "God help me. I love you. I love you too." They kissed, slow and gentle, until Hana's voice called from the living room. "Mom, Dad, come watch us open presents." They pulled apart, smiling. As the afternoon wore on, Minjae watched Jiwoo with their daughters, and something settled in his chest, a feeling he couldn't quite name, but that felt like peace. After the kidnapping, everything had changed. Minjae had restructured his entire organization. He'd stepped back from day-to-day operations, delegating power to trusted lieutenants. He'd made it crystal clear to every crew and soul that his family was off limits, and that anyone who threatened them would face consequences beyond imagination. The Busan crew had backed off, for now, but Minjae knew it wouldn't last forever. There would always be someone looking for weakness, someone willing to push boundaries. But he'd meant what he said in that factory. Let them come. Later, after the girls had crashed from their sugar high and were napping in the bedroom, Minjae and Jiwoo sat together on the small couch. "I've been thinking," Jiwoo said, her head resting on his shoulder, "about what comes next." "What do you mean?" "This apartment is too small. We're already cramped. And as the girls get older," she paused. "But I don't want to move into your penthouse. It doesn't feel right." "Then we'll find something else," Minjae said immediately. "Something that's ours. All of ours." Jiwoo lifted her head to look at him. "You'd do that?" "I'd do anything," she smiled. "I'm starting to believe that." "Good." They sat in comfortable silence for a while, listening to the distant sounds of the city outside. Then Jiwoo spoke again, her voice softer. "There's something else I need to tell you." Minjae's stomach tightened. "What is it?" She took his hand, placing it on her stomach. "I'm pregnant." The world stopped. Minjae stared at her, his mind going blank. "What?" "I'm pregnant. About 8 weeks. Jiwoo's eyes searched his face, nervous. "I found out last week. I was trying to figure out how to tell you, and then, with the birthday and everything." Minjae pulled her into his arms, cutting off her words. He held her so tightly she gasped. "We're having a baby," he whispered against her hair. "We're having a baby," she confirmed. When he pulled back, there were tears streaming down his face. "I'm going to be here this time. For all of it. Every doctor's appointment. Every ultrasound. I'm going to—" "I know." Jiwoo wiped his tears with her thumbs. "I know you will." They kissed again, and this time it tasted like hope. 6 weeks later, the new house was in Seongbuk-dong.
Maybe you're listening to this while doing something simple. Washing dishes, tidying up, trying to relax. And that's exactly why these stories work. When you unlock full access, you get 30 stories. Over 30 hours of audio with no interruptions. You press play, and the story just keeps going. If you want to continue right now, scan the QR code on your SC, or tap the link in the pinned comment. What was never said continues there.
Tucked away in a quiet neighborhood with tree-lined streets and actual yards. It was a traditional Korean house that had been renovated with modern amenities, a perfect blend of old and new. Minjae had bought it the week after Jiwoo told him about the pregnancy. Moving day was chaos. Hana and Yuna ran through the empty rooms, their voices echoing off the walls as they claimed bedrooms and argued over who got the bigger closet. Jiwoo directed the movers with practiced efficiency, while simultaneously trying to keep the girls from breaking anything. Minjae stood in the doorway of what would be the nursery, imagining it filled with a crib and toys, and all the things he'd missed the first time around. This time would be different. This time, he would be the father his children deserved. That evening, after the movers had left, and the girls were finally asleep in their new rooms, Minjae and Jiwoo stood in the master bedroom surrounded by unpacked boxes. This is really happening, Jiwoo said, looking around. We're really doing this. Are you having second thoughts? No. She turned to face him. Are you? Min-jae pulled her close. Never. They stood there for a while, just holding each other. Then Jiwoo's phone buzzed. She pulled it out, glancing at the screen. Her expression changed. What is it? Min-jae asked. Jiwoo held up the phone. It was a text from an unknown number. Congratulations on the new house. Beautiful neighborhood. I especially love the park where your daughters like to play. Below the message was a photo. It showed Hana and Yuna on the swings at the park 3 blocks away, a park they'd discovered just yesterday. Min-jae's blood went cold. Another text came through. Did you really think stepping back would be enough? Did you think we'd just forget? Tell Min-jae that debt collectors always come for what they're owed, and we're owed a lot. Jiwoo looked up at him, fear creeping into her eyes. Min-jae, who is this? Min-jae stared at the photo, his mind racing through possibilities. The Busan crew had been quiet for months. Too quiet. This wasn't Choi's style. This was someone else. Someone new. Or someone old who'd been waiting for the right moment to strike. He pulled Jiwoo close, his jaw set. Pack a bag. We're leaving tonight. What? Min-jae. Now Jiwoo. His phone rang. Kang-dae. Boss, we have a problem. Someone's been digging into your past. Deep. They know about Japan. They know about the Kim family. They know about... I know. Min-jae cut him off. They just made contact. What do you want me to do? Min-jae looked at Jiwoo. At the house they just moved into. At the life they were trying to build. Find out who they are, he said quietly. And then we end this. Permanently. He hung up. Jiwoo was still staring at him, her hand protectively over her stomach. What did you do, Min-jae? She whispered. What did you do before we met? Min-jae's throat tightened. The past he thought he'd buried was rising from the grave, and it was coming for everything he loved. I'll tell you everything, he promised. But first, we need to get you and the girls somewhere safe. Safe from what? Min-jae looked down at the photo on her phone one more time. His daughters, smiling on the swings, completely unaware they were being watched. From me? He said. From who I used to be.